Somewhere in a hospital right now, a newborn just opened its eyes for the first time. If she was born 100 years ago, she might expect to live to 60. If she was born today, maybe 85, 90 if she's lucky. But what if she was born tomorrow? In a world where 200 years wasn't a fantasy. What if she could watch not just her children grow old, but her great-great-great-grandchildren? What if death, as we know it, became optional? Or at least, negotiable? This isn't science fiction anymore. Scientists are already doing it, to worms, to mice, to monkeys. And some of them believe the same tricks could work on us. So today, we're asking the question nobody has a full answer to yet. What would actually happen if humans could live for 200 years? Let's start with the science, because this isn't just wishful thinking anymore. Aging isn't one single switch inside your body. It's more like a slow pile-up of tiny malfunctions. Your cells stop dividing properly. Your DNA collects small errors, like a photocopy of a photocopy of a photocopy. Your mitochondria, the tiny power plants inside your cells, start running less efficiently. Scientists have actually identified around 12 of these biological damage categories. They call them the hallmarks of aging. And here's the wild part. Researchers have already reversed some of them in lab animals. In 2016, scientists in California used a technique called partial cellular reprogramming. In simple terms, they took old, tired mouse cells and pressed a kind of biological reset button. The cells didn't turn into young cells completely, but they started acting younger. Wrinkled mouse skin became smoother, damaged organs showed signs of repair. Then in 2020, researchers restored vision in blind, aging mice using a similar reprogramming approach. Their optic nerves, which don't normally regenerate, actually grew back. If you can turn back the clock in a mouse's eye, what stops you from doing it in a human heart or a human brain? That's the multi-billion-dollar bet several biotech companies are making right now. Some are backed by the richest people on the planet, because if you can delay aging by even 10 or 20 years, you're not selling a product. You're selling more life itself. So let's say it works. Let's say in 50 years, medicine has genuinely cracked the code, and 200 years becomes a realistic human lifespan. What happens next? First, think about careers. Right now, most people spend about 40 years working before retiring. But if you're going to live 200 years, a 40-year career is barely a warm-up. Would you still choose one profession for your entire life? Or would you become a doctor for 30 years, then retrain as an architect, then later become a marine biologist, then a teacher? Some economists argue this could be a golden age of human potential. Imagine a single person accumulating multiple lifetimes worth of mastery. A 200-year-old engineer wouldn't just have decades of experience. They'd have centuries. But there's a darker side to this. If people don't retire at 65 anymore, if they're still sharp, still working at 150, where does that leave the next generation? Jobs don't multiply just because people live longer. If the same person occupies the same senior position for 150 years instead of 30, younger workers could find themselves waiting decades just to get a foot in the door. Some researchers actually warn about this exact problem. They call it gerontocracy, a society ruled, economically and politically, by people who simply refuse to age out of power. Speaking of power, think about politics. Right now, world leaders serve years, sometimes decades. But what happens when a leader can realistically hold office for 100 years? Entire generations could grow up never knowing a different government, a different president, a different face on the currency. Would democracies still function the way we expect them to? Would revolutions become the only way for young generations to have a voice? Now let's talk about something even more personal, family. If you live to 200, you might witness 6 or 7 generations of your own bloodline. Grandparents already feel like time travelers to some kids. Imagine having a living relative who remembers a world before smartphones, before the internet, before television even existed. But would relationships stretch that long naturally? Right now, marriages are built around a lifetime of roughly 80 years. Would 2 people really commit to one partner for 2 centuries? Divorce rates might reshape entirely, or marriage as an institution might transform into something we don't even have a word for yet. And what about children? If your career spans 200 years, would you even want kids in your 20s anymore? Some scientists speculate people might delay having children until they're 80, 90, even older, once medicine gives them plenty of runway left. Population growth could spiral in ways today's governments have never had to plan for. Fewer people dying, plus new people still being born, equals a planet trying to support numbers we've never experienced in human history. Speaking of the planet, let's talk resources. Right now, humanity already strains under the pressure of feeding, housing, and powering 8 billion people. If lifespans doubled or tripled, and death rates dropped dramatically, global population could balloon in ways cities, farmlands, and energy grids were never designed for. Would we need to colonize other planets just to have enough room? Would food production need to be reinvented from the ground up? Some experts believe living longer might force humanity to finally get serious about vertical farming, ocean cities, and sustainable energy, not as luxuries, but as absolute survival necessities. Now here's a question that hits different. Would you actually want to live 200 years? Because a longer life doesn't automatically mean a better one. If your body only feels young for the first 80 years, and the next 120 are filled with fragile joints, fading memory, and slow decline, that's not a gift, that's a much longer sentence. This is why most longevity scientists don't just talk about lifespan, the number of years you're alive. They talk about health span, the number of years you're alive and thriving. The real dream isn't just adding more birthdays. It's adding more good years, years where you can still run, still think clearly, still fall in love, still chase new goals. If scientists manage to extend lifespan without extending health span, 200 years could feel less like a blessing and more like a slow-motion tragedy. There's also a psychological question nobody talks about enough. Would the human mind even want to keep going? Imagine outliving your parents, your friends, your first love, your childhood home, your entire generation. Grief doesn't disappear just because medicine keeps your heart beating. If anything, a 200-year lifespan might mean carrying 200 years' worth of loss. Some psychologists speculate that radical life extension could create an entirely new category of mental health challenges, people who are biologically young but emotionally exhausted from having lived and lost so much. And then there's the big ethical question, who actually gets access to this? Right now, cutting-edge medicine is expensive. Experimental longevity treatments, especially early on, would likely cost a fortune, which means the 200-year lifespan might not be available to everyone. It could become the ultimate luxury item, reserved for the wealthy, while everyone else ages and dies the way humans always have. That's not just unfair. That's potentially the biggest wealth gap humanity has ever created, a gap measured not in money, but in time itself. The rich wouldn't just have more resources, they'd have more life. Would governments regulate access to these treatments the way they regulate other medicines? Or would longevity quietly become the new class divide, one written into your very biology? So where does this leave us? The science says 200 years isn't impossible. Reprogramming cells, repairing DNA damage, replacing worn-out tissues, these aren't fantasies anymore. They're active fields of research, funded by real money, tested on real animals, inching closer to real humans every year. But the harder question was never really about biology. It's about what kind of world we'd be building if it worked. A world where careers span centuries, where leaders never step down, where families stretch across generations we can barely imagine today, where the planet has to somehow support billions of people who simply don't die on schedule anymore. Maybe 200 years of life sounds incredible right now, reading this on your phone with your entire lifetime still ahead of you. But maybe the real question isn't would you want to live to 200? Maybe it's this: if you could guarantee that every one of those 200 years would be lived in good health, surrounded by people you love, doing work that actually matters to you, would 200 years even feel like enough? Because in the end, it was never really about how long we live. It's about how fully we live the years we're given, however many of them there turn out to be.